Alvena, can you hear me?
Hi, yes.
Okay,
Hi.
please, can you share your screen? Okay. Okay, I'm going to read her profile. Alvena Jana Mevinda is 22-year-old final year medical student at University of Indonesia and Cipto Manzukumuso National General Hospital, Jakarta. She strives to translate her passion for global health, medicine, research, and information technology to improve healthcare systems across the world. She is currently serving as the Deputy Director for Research and Program Lead for Women in Global Health Research of Global Health Focus, Asian chapter. She is also a member of the Youth Editorial Board of Public Health Challenges, a weekly journal. She has published in BMC and the American Journal of Tropical Hygiene and Medicine, among others. Driven by her passion to help the medical community and empower youth during the pandemic, she co-founded a global grassroots movement called Students Against COVID, SAC, in 2020. Now, a movement in over 100 countries. SAC won the CUGA's Lisa High Impact Program Award in 2021. He also won MIT COVID-19 Challenge Hackathon, Latin American versus COVID-19, with a proposal about machine learning forward SMS chatbot for patient monitoring. Please, Albena, you can go ahead. Are you there?
Yeah, I'm here. So should I proceed?
Yes, proceed.
Okay. Can you all see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Yes, we can see. Yeah.
Okay, then I'm starting. Hi, everyone. Thank you very much, Wafer, for the introduction. Once again, I'm Adriana. I'm from Indonesia, and today what I will be presenting is about literature review as well as my experience as a woman in global health research. So first of all, of course, thank you very much for the Community Health Awareness Network, as well as the Students Against COVID and Medbound for the opportunity to be here. Am I audible?
Yes, you are. Please proceed.
Okay, thank you. So I would like to begin the presentation with a question. So why do you think research is important? So I think you can all use the chat box to write about it. And I think it will be great if you can also write about where you're coming from, so I can see, well, like, so I can get to know you all better, although it's, of course, virtual. So, well, in the meantime, I would like to also mention that in this presentation, I will be dividing the presentation into 3 parts. The first part will be about why research is important. The next one is a more in-depth information about why, as women, we should be um, a part of the research field. And lastly, it will be more technical about literature review and how to write it. And hi, Chisom from Nigeria. I would like to learn more about why do you think research is important? If you can write it there in the chat box. Well, I think while I wait for answers from the attendees, I can just share a bit about my story. I think based on my story, research are very important for at least two things. Firstly, it offers a chance for us to personally develop ourselves into someone better. So here are some pictures of the courses that have been held by Global Health Focus in African and Asian countries. So it's currently the organization I'm in, and we're focusing on improving research skills among youth. And based on these experiences, I learned that research allows me to have better writing skills, communication skills, and analytic skills. So there are a lot of skills that we can improve by delving more into research. And at the same time, as you can see here, by doing research, by being involved in research, we can actually get to know a lot more people. For example, through attending courses like this, or through attending research conferences. And well, you can also publish your work, and then with that publications, you can be more known, and people may just send you email to work together or collaborate. And based on my experience, that broadens my horizon like a lot, because I got to learn more about how different people think about one issue. I got to learn more about different cultures, and in the process, I got to understand more that we cannot see an issue with just one perspective. And thus, I think once again that research has been a very important avenue for me for personal development. Okay, I also got some answers here in the chat box. So, well, research helps to add the already existing body of knowledge from excellent Nigeria. I agree. I think, well, I think I will cover about this more in this next slide. And then there's also about new treatment, information about the new treatment that are discovered. And also it's, of course, about developing scientific community. And well, it's about discovery, simplifying complex questions. I think this is a very important point. And well, and I think Feden from India has just mentioned something that I've already mentioned here, which is about, well, it's a very holistic way of learning more about a particular topic, and not just about that topic only, I think, but also about the field as a whole, and also about ourselves. So I hope that by knowing that this is important for not only for the scientific community, but also for ourselves, we can be more motivated in doing research. And lastly, and the second reason on why research as advocacy is important, well, the reason why research is important is because research is also a form of advocacy. And if I may argue, this is one of the most important way of advocating your issues. So, well, if you can see in the right side of the slide, this is a picture of a mask. So this is one of the major example of the usage of research as an advocacy tool. So for example, if you remember in the beginning of the pandemic, we are not obliged to wear a mask because, well, there's no research about it yet. And people thought that it is not significant in reducing the risk of transmission. But then new research, new studies were published, and it shows that masks are significant in reducing our chances to get COVID. And so, well, days, several times after the research papers published, you can see that all over the world, people wear masks. So research is a very important part of advocacy because it allows us to show that what we argue is evidence-based. So for example, if you are advocating for an issue and, well, you've been feeling about that issue for a long time, if you don't have the data from the field, then you cannot say that that issue is being experienced by everyone. But with research, you can turn something that, well, you feel and you know that your community feel into something that is truly urgent. Because with research, you can illustrate just how important the issue is, just how important the solution is, if your research is more about solution. And then it adds the sense of urgency for the policymakers and for other stakeholders to take action. And so I think this is also a very important motivation that you can think of. So research is not just about adding knowledge. Of course, it's very important to add knowledge, but at the end of the day, research should also be beneficial to the larger community. And, well, that has always been a part of research. Well, it's not, I think my illustration about mask is perhaps very clear in terms of how it advocates for the better in the public. But actually, well, even if you are doing preclinical research or research that more focus on pathophysiology, for example, it can also benefit the community as a whole because, well, from the pathophysiology, you can learn more about the diseases, and then from that discovery, other researchers can also start working on the treatment, for example, and at the end of the day, it will still benefit the community. So if I have to sum up, the research are very important for two things. Firstly, it's to add to our knowledge, and hence it serves as an advocacy tool, one of the most important advocacy ways of doing advocacy. And secondly, it's also very important for our personal development because we got to learn a lot of skill sets. And of course, we can always use that in our CV when we're applying to higher education or jobs. It's very important because, once again, research shows that we have this amazing number of skill sets. And by showing it in our CV, then of course people will think that, oh, this person is able to do several skills, several very important skills like analytical skills, writing skills that I just mentioned. So of course that helps with your CV. And so that is about research as in general. But now I would like to focus a bit more on women. So my next question for the audience would be, why do you think research is especially important for women? And why should we emphasize that we need more women in the research field? And so while you are all pondering on the question, I will show you this illustration that I think might help to see more about the current condition of women representation. So you see here, this is about COVID-19 task force. Well, it's not just about research field, but more about women representation in general. So if you see here, men outnumber women 3-1 on COVID-19 task forces. And perhaps you can also write, or you can just also ponder, what do you think about this? When you see headlines like this, what do you feel? Do you feel saddened? Do you feel it's okay? Do you feel angry? What do you feel? And why? For me, at first, I should be honest, when I first learned about the SDGs. So one of the point of the SDGs is to ensure that women are more represented in all fields, especially in leadership. I didn't understand why. I mean, of course, I know that women should be represented, but at the same time, I didn't think that we should force women to be the one in charge. I thought from my privileged side, if I don't want it, then why should I be forced to do it? And I think if we look from that lens, it's true. But the truth is, of course, it's not as simple. It's not just that women do not want to be represented. We are facing a lot of barriers that disproportionately affects us and doesn't allow us to actually represent ourselves. And so, yeah, I got an answer here that women bring unique perspective to scientific conversation and to research. And yeah, I think that is a very strong point that you're just mentioning. And that's one of the points that I would like to delve deeper in this part of the presentation. So why women? So this is particularly important for the healthcare sector, but once again, women representation is needed in all fields because we are less represented in almost all fields. But this is particularly a problem for us in the healthcare sector, because if you look at the statistics, 70% of the healthcare workforce are women. Yet we occupy a certain percentage of leadership positions. So can any of you guess the percentage? So once again, we are occupying 70% of the healthcare workforce. How many of us do you think are in leadership positions? So I will just go directly into the answer. So the answer is less than 25%. Oh. Someone here answered 40%. So unfortunately, it's even lesser than that. As you can see here, it's less than 25%. And this is a staggering amount because, well, of course, we are the majority of the healthcare workforce. So how come is it that we are not represented? It's not that men cannot represent women, but of course, as we are the one living as women, we have a specific problems that we face. We have a unique perspective, like what was just mentioned in the chat box. So we should be better represented because that's the way we can ensure that women are being heard. And well, I will show in the later slides that this will not be beneficial only for women, but also for the greater society. And we can help by ensuring that women are adequately represented. We can allow the world to be a lot more better, because gender inequality affects diverse and essential issues globally. So if we think about the association between gender inequality or gender issues with healthcare, we might think only of women's health, because of course we are women. So women's health is of course a very important issue in gender lens of health, but it's not the only issue that is important, and it's not the only issue that is being affected by gender. So there was a report by the WHO that shows that even in climate change, women are disproportionately affected by the impact of climate change to health. And that is caused by a lot of reasons, one of which is, for example, the cultural barrier. So in some parts of the world, women are less likely to seek for healthcare because in their culture, it's just not really permitted to do so. So once again, women faces unique barriers, and at the same time we have unique experiences, and thus of course we have unique perspectives that can help to make the world better. And particularly, of course, by offering our own views and our own experience, so that the solutions, the research questions that are being developed can be more responsive towards the needs of the community. And well, this is more about women in global health, but I think this is also applicable to other parts of research, particularly in health. So as I've mentioned here, the impact of gender inequality to health is not limited to women's health issue, but also to health in general. And if we see here, the definition of global health is on focusing to achieve health equity. And of course, gender disparity is hindering us to achieve complete health equity universally. And well, it's very important for us to also ponder on this issue because SDGs also emphasize on gender equality. So if you see here, these are some of the SDGs that focuses on women and health. So it's about women's health, but also about discrimination, violence against women, representation, and also health financing. So once again, if we take a look at this news, well, it's really saddening. And it's especially saddening if you see here that of the 225 task forces, 26 had no women at all. This is very disappointing because, well, once again, like I've been stressing in this presentation, we need women to ensure that the solution that we're making is, well, is responsive to all the community needs. And also it should be equal to all our community members, including to women. And how can men represent women perfectly? I don't think it's possible. And now it's more on the representation research. So if you see here, there is a research in Lancet that shows that less than 30% of the world's researchers are women. And this number is worst in my area in the West and South Asia. It's only 19%. And in Africa, it's about 30% of the researchers that are women. So, well, in the previous part, I mentioned about women representation as a whole, but turns out it's also very problematic in the academia and the research world. And this is a problem because if we take a look at the next, as the next study, also by Lancet, female authors are more likely to report studying females or both sexes. So because we are female, of course, we are more inclined to learn more about ourselves. And that's why female authors are more inclined to study about females, or at least to differentiate the studies based on sex. Because, well, sex is, of course, one of the factors that influences our health. So for example, here, if you see the percentage of papers in public health addressing sex, oh, well, it's increasing. At first, it was only about 20%, but now it's increasing to be at about 55%. But of course, this is still not the ideal number. And this number is even lower in the medical and pharmaceutical papers. So especially in papers about pharmacy, because well, most of the randomized controlled trial, they include men. I think there was this trend, especially in the beginning of the 2000 and before that, the participants that are recruited for pharmaceutical papers and research are white male who are healthy. And that is actually quite a problem, because being female means that our body may respond differently to the drugs that they are researching. So it's very important that female sex and women are more represented in research. And for example, also in public health, being a woman means that we have a unique role in the community, and thus that means we have, once again, different barriers, different roles, different positions, and that also influences our health-seeking behavior and our access to healthcare. So basically, women should be represented in all fields, but especially in health, is in public health and also in pharmaceutical research and medical research, because we're women, we are made physiologically and also psychologically different. So that's why it's important. And if we see here that female authors are more likely to report studying females, yet at the same time, the number of female authors and researchers are less than 30%, then who will represent us in this research field? Oh, and there's also a point in another research that shows that more diverse researchers actually help produce more nuanced and relevant studies that are applicable to broader populations. And this includes women as well. If women are included in the research team, then we are able to position ourselves better into the perspective of the community, and hence the studies will be more responsive towards the community needs. And well, so my key points about women being in research is that, firstly, better representation for women is needed in all fields, including in health research. And then it's because through research, we as women can advocate for our unique needs, unique problems, barriers, and also perspective. And lastly, gender inequality, we know it affects a lot of health issues, and this can be explored through research. So the 3 key points on why women especially should take part in research is because of representation, advocacy, and exploration. So I hope that by this point, we know that not only research is important for young people in general, but it's also important for young women. And well, it's actually not only important for women and for the gender issues. So if you see here, the key point is representation. And we know that a lot of things need better representation. It's not just about women. So for example, if you are a minority in your country, then you may face a different barrier compared to the majority of the people in your country. And so if you are from the minority, then you also need to take part in research, especially in researching about your own community, because that will allow your community to have their voices heard and to have better representation. So while this part of the presentation focuses more on why women should take part in research, it's not only about women. It's basically about the need for us to all represent ourselves, because we all have different factors that affects our our experiences, our barriers, our problems, and hence that all needs representation. And well, after you know now, I hope by now you know that research is very important for your own advocacy, for your community's advocacy, and for your own personal development. Well, it's now time to start your research journey. And based on my experience, there are three steps that you need to do. The first one is to find your motivation and interest. And bear in mind that this is always the hardest step, because the first step is always the hardest. I think you must have heard of this quote. So motivation keeps us ongoing. And in all journey in life, including in research, of course, there will be ups and downs. And with motivation, it will be easier to navigate that. And well, I think everyone's motivation would be different. If you're willing, you can share your motivation in the chat box, so maybe we can all learn with you. But once again, advocacy and personal development are two of the motivations that you can always have in your heart whenever you're tired in your research journey. And aside of motivation, interest is also important, because, well, it will be hard to navigate the research field if you don't know what your interest is, especially because, well, even the health sector is a very large field. And if we focus on a certain field, for example, pharmacy, pharmacy itself can still be divided into different fields. And so it's very important for us to find a specific interest. For example, perhaps you're interested in how gender affects health issues, or how, or perhaps it's more clinical, like pharmacogenomics, anything. Basically, you need to identify that. But if you don't really know your interest, it's okay as well, because sometimes your interests are found along the way. And well, so that's where the next step comes in. So basically, one of the most important things is to just start writing, because that's how you know what you like to do. Firstly, that's how you know whether you like research or not. And secondly, that's also how you can identify which topic interests you, which topic, when you're reading it, sparks joy in your heart, and which topic you would like to advocate more. So just start doing it, start writing, start devising your research proposal if you are doing a primary research. Just do it. And at the same time, I have the last tip. So if you are starting to do something, of course, it won't always be easy. So I would suggest you to join a community to meet mentors and fellow researchers. For example, perhaps the Community Health Awareness Network, even though it's not really focused on research, I'm sure it can offer you some perspectives as well. Or Students Against COVID have some research projects going on. And also, of course, since I'm part of the Global Health Focus, we are also a community that allows you to find mentors. I myself have been very helped with Global Health Focus in terms of research and writing, because I got to be connected with a lot of professors, etc. And so, well, alone we can do so little, together we can do so much. So that's something that will help you propel your research journey further. And also, of course, attending trainings like this will also be very helpful. And well, these are some publications by us, in case you're interested to learn more about GHF. And now I would like to go to the next part, which is more technical. It will be about literature review. So, well, literature review is basically a summary and analysis and synthesis of the scientific literature on a particular topic. So we know that when we are searching for articles, if you are using PubMed or Google Scholar, you may find that there's so many so many articles. There can be hundreds of thousands of articles. And well, research articles are being published every day. And so it may be hard to navigate all of them, to read all of them. And that's where literature review comes in. Because it allows us to read not only the summary of a certain topic. So for example, you're interested about genetics, then literature review is a summary about it, but it's also about the analysis of the current situation of the topic. So for example, I once published a literature review about gene therapy and Angelman syndrome, which is a neurological problem in children, which are genetically, basically it's caused by a mutation. And I want to learn more about gene therapy and how it helps in addressing that disease. So literature review helps summarize it and also analyze the current standpoint of that topic. So gene therapy, of course, it has some issues in it. For example, like it has the ethical issues, economical issues that can hinder its application. And so by reading a literature review, we will be able to also analyze that topic with different perspectives. So it offers us a lot of perspective of a topic. And yeah, this is basically a summary of what I just said. So literature review builds a picture of what is currently known and what is currently unknown. And also, of course, the challenges, the barriers of adopting that issue if it's focusing on a solution, etc. And so by reading a literature review, by writing a literature review, we hope that the one who reads it will be able to understand the topic more in depth. So it's not only just about what the topic is about, but also about what can they do to further improve the topic. So for example, back to the gene therapy example. So in the article I wrote about the ethical implications of gene therapy, and also, well, how basically can we help and how can we advance gene therapy by addressing the ethical issue as well. And that is the question that remain unanswered. And at the same time, it served as a food for thought for our readers to think about, and hopefully to also brainstorm about the solution so they can do more research about it in the future, and well, adopt the solution in the future. And there are several steps to write a literature review. So firstly, of course, it's defining a topic. So you need to first define the topic. And the way to do it is, of course, to first know about your interest. And secondly, you need to choose the type of the review that you want to write. And there are a lot of types of reviews. And I will delve deeper into it later. And then you need to search the literature. Basically, you need to pick the sources that you are going to base the literature review on. And then the next step is to do journal reading. Basically, you need to read the journal and understand the journal article. And lastly, well, you need to know which part of the article is important for your topic and for your review. And lastly, to just start writing. And firstly, well, in defining a topic, as I've said before, the topic must be interesting to you. And at the same time, well, of course, when we're writing something, we want people to read it. And so how to make people to read it is to write something people want to read, right? And the way that we can ensure that is by ensuring that what we're writing is important for the field. And at the same time, it's also must be a well-defined issue. So it should be specific. And I will show you the example later in the next slide. And so a tip to ensure that the topic is interesting is to find a hot topic in your research area. And one of the ways is, for example, to look at the WHO's website. So they have all sorts of health topics in their website. So you can see here that, oh, well, this one is about gender and health. So they are focusing on gender-based discrimination because it's currently still a big problem. And also usually aside of looking at the World Health Organization's website, I also look at Google. So I just search at Google. For example, if I'm going to write about cancer, then I just search cancer journal, and then I just look at the journal that comes up first. And in that journal, there must be like most viewed articles or new articles that you can read. And most of the time, those new articles or the most viewed articles are the hot topics in that field. So that's usually helpful for you to determine what topic you would like to write on your research review. But at the same time, don't forget that it should also be well-defined. And a way to make it well-defined is to ensure that it's specific. So for example, here, there are two options. Which one do you think is better? Is it one or two? Okay, so the answer is number two because it's more focused on specifics. So, well, of course, you can write literature review with the first question, but the problem is the review will be very broad. And I think you must have seen some review articles that instead answers questions like this, and it's okay too. But the problem is, once again, it's very broad, and because it's very broad, you won't be able to analyze the topic very deeply. So, for example, because you are listing all the treatment for this syndrome, then you won't have the space to also discuss about their ethical implications or their economical issues, because, well, you need to cover for all treatments. And in journals, we usually have like the maximum words. Although, well, if you're writing a longer review, then usually they allow up to 5,000 words. but still, or even more than that, but still it's better to be more focused on specific, because then you can you can analyze the topic deeper. And after you define your topic, you ensure that the topic is interesting for you and the reader, and that it is well defined and specific. The next step is to choose the type of literature review that you're going to write. So one thing about literature review is, once again, it's a summary and an analysis of a certain topic. So you are not working on a new thing. It's not like you're doing a primary research, which will be discussed instead in the next presentation after this. So in literature review, you're not writing new thing, but you're analyzing. And there are a few ways on how you can do that. Firstly is to write narrative literature review, which is the type that I will be focusing the most in this presentation. So in the narrative literature review, basically it's a summary and analysis still, but in this type of review, you are not obliged to put in your method, as in how do you search for your sources. It's not really obligatory. It's just that you're writing a summary and analysis. But of course, if you want to include your method, it's fine as well. But that is not the main point of this type of review. And there are two types of the narrative literature review. It's mini review and also full-length review. So this is different in terms of the length. So mini review usually have up to 80 references. It can have more, but usually at 80 references. While full-length review articles usually have more than 100 references. And of course, this is also reflected in the length of the paper. So mini review articles, based on my experience, we write about 3,000 words, while full-length review articles can be longer. And there's also scoping review. So scoping review is focusing more on showing how many literature are currently in the are currently explaining and researching about the topic. So basically it shows that, so it's usually for a topic that is not really well established. So it, it's well defined, but it's not known yet how many articles have been working on that specific topic. It's something like that. So you want to know how many articles are available in the databases, etc. And this is a very important step before you continue to the systematic review. So what makes the narrative review and the other types of review different is that in this part, method is not mandatory, but in this three types of review, methods are mandatory, because, well, in scoping review, you want to know how many articles are now available about a certain topic. So of course, the method should be clear. And similarly, in systematic review, the method should also be clear, but it's because, well, systematic review is like the comprehensive version of narrative review. So it should also show the method, and it should critically appraise the articles that you are including in, a scientific way, which I will show in the later slide. And lastly, there's also systematic review and meta-analysis. This is basically a systematic review, but then you also add a statistical analysis with it. So it's called meta-analysis. I won't be focusing too much on it today. And after that, after you choose your topic, you know the type you're working on, the next step is to search for the articles. And there are some ways, some steps that you need to do to be able to search for articles. The first one is to determine your inclusion and exclusion criteria. And then after that, you can design your keyword. And after that, you can search in the search engine and also medical or other research databases. So I will start with how to determine inclusion and exclusion criteria. Well, these are some of the these are some of the criteria that are usually being used for research articles. And so I will start with the first one. It's date. It's usually date of publication. So this is especially important if the issue is time sensitive. So for example, maybe the research in the 90s is no longer relevant for us in the 2022, because it's such a long time ago. The method may not be relevant to what we're doing now, something like that. So date is one of the things that you can do. So usually if you are using date as one of your inclusion criteria, what is being used is usually about 5 to 10 years, because those are considered the years in which the research methods, the research analysis, and the scientific basis of research studies are still relevant to what we know today. But at the same time, it's not always mandatory to add date as your inclusion criteria, because sometimes it's still relevant. In some cases, it might still be relevant. And this is why you need to first define your topic thoroughly, because that's how you know which inclusion criteria and exclusion criteria you should include. So for example, perhaps for public health issues, date is not really a problem, because, gender issues is not really affected by the years. It's still happening worldwide, and the culture is not easily changed, even with 100 years of differences, something like that. So once again, it's up to the topic in the end on whether to add date as one of your criteria. And the second one is about exposure of interest. So this is basically what the topic is about. So for example, if you are working on knowing factors that influence women in their health-seeking behavior, then perhaps one of the exposure of interest is about socioeconomic factor, cultural factor. So it's basically what kind of exposure do you want to learn more and why in your review? Or for example, if it's a pharmacy study, then maybe it's more about the intervention. What interventions are being given to the patients, what drugs, etc. And the third criteria is about the location. So why location is important is because, a lot of things, of course. Firstly, location determine the races, the percentage of races and ethnicities, and also in public health problems, it also impacts our cultural behavior, for example. So perhaps someone in Southeast Asia may respond differently to digital health intervention compared to someone in the Arctic region, for example. So that's why you can also add this as your inclusion criteria. And you can also use this as a way to further specify your literature review. So for example, I once made a systematic review about the factors that influence preeclampsia in Asian women. And that I don't think that is very new, but our review is actually the first review that focuses solely on Asian women. Before, the review articles that are available focuses more globally. So we want to know whether there are differences if you look globally versus if you look at Asian women. And turns out there are some differences. So aside of making this as your inclusion criteria, this is actually a fun way to know about the topic, to look for topics that are new, that are novel, and that can help you gain more reader. And the next criteria is language. So this is more about our own limitations. So we cannot understand our language in the world. So usually for language, you just add what language you understand, not just you, but your team as well. So for example, if you have a multinational team, so of course, probably the language will be, there will be a lot more languages that you can include in your review. And the next criteria is participants. So there are a lot of factors about participants that you can include in your criteria. So for example, it can be, you can only include women. For example, breast cancer is known to happen to both men and women, but maybe in the review about a certain drug, you want to only focus on women, something like that. You can also limit the age range. So because probably elderly and pediatric patients have different factors and physiological systems, etc. So yeah, basically it's more about demography. You can just think of what factors are the most important for your topic and the most relevant for your topic. And usually peer review is also included in criteria. So if you know medxref.org, I think that's the website. So it offers publication of non-peer review paper. So basically you can just put your paper there and then people can read it and give feedback. So that is good for the scientific community, but at the same time, it may not be as good for review articles because, well, peer review allows the articles to go through rigorous process that ensures that all the things written there, written in the research, the statistical analysis is correct. And so I strongly suggest that you include only peer-reviewed articles in your review, with the exception of perhaps some topics that are not really available yet in the form of peer-reviewed articles, like COVID-19. Some of the research topics are perhaps not peer-reviewed yet. And the next criteria is about reported outcomes. So this is basically what outcomes would you like to learn more? Would you like to write an exploratory review? So for example, about the breast cancer drug in women, perhaps the outcome you would like to learn more is about how the drug is affecting their mortality. Is mortality reduced or not, something like that. And then there's also the next criteria is settings. So you can differentiate based on settings. So it's all about the factors again. So for example, urban setting versus rural setting, of course, has different set of barriers that they're facing. At the same time, you can also differentiate based on hospitals versus clinics, or hospitals versus community programs, something like that. And the next criteria is study design. So I will, in the next slide, you will learn more that different topics have different preferred study design. And lastly, it's type of publication. Usually you only include original articles in your review, except if you are reviewing a review. So if you see there's this ongoing trend, you can see it in a lot of research journals. So basically, there's systematic review of systematic review, because systematic review are now growing in abundance, and so we need summary of it, basically something like that. But if you're just starting in review, especially, start with original research and do not include letters and commentaries, because we want real data. And these are the examples of this is the inclusion and exclusion criteria I got from my study, my review about gene therapy and Angelman syndrome. Basically, I include only peer-reviewed articles about this therapy in this syndrome, which is the syndrome is defined by molecular deletions, etc. You see here. And as my team is a multinational team with people from Greece, Ukraine, Indonesia, and also India, these are the languages that we're including. And so I also included here whether full text is available or not. It's also a criteria that you should include, because some research articles may be relevant for us, but at the same time, it's only available as abstract, and so you won't be able to analyze and learn in depth about the article, and so it should be excluded. And for exclusion criteria, you can exclude studies that also acknowledge a conflict of interest, because sometimes that can skew the recommendation, the conclusion to be more favorable, even though it's not actually the case. And so this is also important in choosing the outcomes, especially. So it should be patient oriented instead of disease oriented. This is especially if you are writing reviews that are medical, or also I think pharmacy related. I think it's also should be patient oriented. So for example, here, instead of wanting to learn about whether antiarrhythmic therapy is associated with the decrease of incidence of abnormality in echocardiograms, electrocardiograms, you should instead focus on whether it improved the patient situation, especially in terms of mortality. So because it will be more applicable for the patients. And in extension, it will be more interesting for the readers, and it will be more beneficial for the community. And this is the other example, if what we are learning is more inclined to public health. So this is basically similar. And in selecting the right study design, you can refer to this. This is actually, I think this is from Cochrane. So Cochrane is one of the organization that works on systematic review articles. But so this is basically, if you see here, is very medical. So if you are working on reviews that are more public health, you can you don't need to refer to this. But basically, you can see here that articles focusing on therapy should include cohort studies, because cohort allows us to illustrate about the impact, the effect of therapy better. And while prognosis, it should be cohort as well, because we are following the patient from the start, or in the case of retrospective cohort, then we are tracing back the history of the patient. And so we can know if the factors that we are studying truly affects the prognosis. And in diagnosis, the best one is cohort or cross-sectional studies, etc. So you can basically refer to this table to help you in deciding which study design is best to include in your review articles. So in terms of my review about gene therapy, what I included was preclinical studies, because gene therapy is not being conducted to patients at the moment. while for my article about preeclampsia, because it's about risk factors, so basically it's about prognosis, what I included was cohort studies. And after you selected your inclusion criteria, the next one is database search. So, but before that, you need to first design your keywords, and you can choose your medical databases. So here are some databases that you can use. This is more medical, but perhaps if you know some other research databases, you can write in the chat box. And what you need to remember in writing review articles is that the articles that you're including does not necessarily need to only be the ones you find in the database. There's also this procedure called snowballing, if I'm not mistaken. So basically you can see in the references you find in the databases. So in the article, they have references, right? And in the references, you can see whether some of the articles may also be relevant to your topic. And even though they are not shown in the database result, you can also include it. So it's permitted to add additional studies that are relevant to your topic. And in making the keywords, you need to, one of the tip is to use mesh terms. So this is basically medical subject headings. This is especially important if what you're writing is health-related review articles, not only about medical health, but also, for example, public and global health. They also frequently use medical subject headings. So if you want to make some mesh terms, you can go to this website. And in this website, you can search, for example, so you can search in this box. For example, I'm searching gene therapy, and turns out the word, the mesh word is genetic therapy, but at the same time, this genetic therapy will also show all related terms like this. So even if you are searching gene therapy instead of genetic therapy, it will show all these terms. But if you are instead writing something more specific, so for example, in Angelman syndrome is the therapy to UBE31A. So for example, if you instead write UBE318 therapy, it won't show because it's not a mesh word. It will still show some articles, but the articles won't be as many because, well, it doesn't include all these terms. And we know that in writing research, sometimes people use different terms. So that's why using a mesh terms is very recommended. And then after you choose the term based on your mesh terms, so how to choose your mesh terms is basically by first defining your topic. After you know your topic, you can look which words are relevant. So for example, in this part, does gene therapy has the potential to improve Angelman syndrome? And the important points here is gene therapy and Angelman syndrome. So the mesh term for gene therapy is genetic therapy. So that's why we include genetic therapy here instead. And then Angelman syndrome, if you look at the mesh terms, it's also Angelman syndrome. So we can include that in our keyword as well. So we, how to better construct our keyword is that by using the Boolean system. So basically you use and, or not. So if you are using and, then the result will be both about articles that included both genetic therapy and Angelman syndrome. If you write or instead of and here, it will include articles that write about any of them. If you write not, then it will not include, well, it will be like this. So for example, in this example, what I use is not review, because what I want is to get sources that are not review articles, that are original articles. So I included not review. So I want the article that is included in the search results to not have the word review, for example. And so these are the results. So if you can see here, the articles contain both the word gene therapy and also Engelmann syndrome. And I also have a tip in how to select the articles. So you firstly need to screen the article abstract before retrieving a full text article, because it will save you a lot of time, as abstracts are summary of the articles. So firstly, you need to screen the title. Then sometimes if you screen the title, it may be relevant, but then when you read the abstract, you learn that it's not relevant, or perhaps it's a review instead of an original research article. And it will save you the time to download and learn and read the full text article. And it's also very important to remember that, well, you can include your own research if you already have one, but you need to be objective. If your research is not relevant to the topic, then don't include it. And you need to also be up to date, just like what I've mentioned in the inclusion criteria, about date. But you cannot forget older studies, because sometimes it still adds value. And these are the ideal references of articles based on their types. I think I've mentioned about it. And the next step is to take notes and appraise what you read. So after you choose the articles, now the next step is to read it. And because in literature review, we are doing an analysis, then we cannot only read it and summarize it. We also need to critically appraise it. We need to know whether the article is good in terms of its methods or not, and what can they add, and whether for example, their analysis is correct or not. And one of the ways to do it is to look into some tools that may help. I'm not sure what tool is this, but you can look for some tools that are usually being used for critical appraisals. So they usually differ between study designs. For example, for RCT, you can use the Cochrane risk of bias tools, while for cohort studies, you can use the Strobe checklist. For RCT, you can also use Newcastle Ottawa scale, I think. So there are a lot of tools that you can use, but it is only mandatory to use a tool if you are choosing the systematic review as your type of review. If you are choosing the narrative literature review, you can just appraise the articles qualitatively. So for example, you can just read by yourself and you think that, well, study A lacks method, the methodology is not really good, then you can write that as a part of your observation later. But you don't really need to use any table. And you're free to incorporate something and unincorporate other things that you know. That is actually the power, and at the same time, the limitations of a narrative review, because it allows you to, I don't think cherry picking is the right word, but it allows you to basically be more biased, because you don't use a tool to help you in synthesizing and analyzing the topics and the information that you got from the sources. And so after you use a tool, so aside of using a tool, it's also important to dissect the article by knowing, firstly, knowing the structure of a research article. So firstly, you should contain a title, and also, of course, abstract. And in the introduction, what you need to look and what you need to appraise is if the article properly explain why they are doing the research, what needs are currently at their community, and it should also inform about the aim of the study and what, well, basically just aim of the study. But if they include the hypothesis, it's also very nice. But usually the most important thing is to include the aim of study aside of the overall background of the research. And in the methods, you need to look for the statistical analysis, the sample size. Is it small? Is it enough to illustrate the community needs with that number? And well, also perhaps that they control for confounding factor, etc. So basically, you need to scrutinize their methods, including their method of sample acquisition. Is it biased? Is there potential for bias, or is it representative for the whole community? And then how do they take data from this sample? Is it possible that the sample does not really give the researchers the real data, maybe because they are given incentives such as money that incline them to be more positive in spite of the real issue? And also lastly, statistical analysis. Does the statistical analysis is the statistical analysis correct or not? And if it's correct, is there potential for bias there as well during the statistical analysis process, because it's not blinded, etc. So basically, an appraisal methods is actually the most important thing you need to dissect, aside, of course, the results. So in the results, is the reporting clear or not? And the discussion, usually what's mentioned is the reasoning of the outcomes of the study. There should also be discussion of the study limitations. For example, if their sample size is small, usually they will mention it in discussion, and that is a matter of the thing that you can appraise as well if they don't include that in their discussion. And lastly, the conclusion should also be concisely explain the main argument of the article. And usually there will also be recommendations on what we can do next, including what research topic can be delved into next based on the result of that article. And so this is an example. So if you can see, this is the article title, this is the abstract, and usually after abstracts, there is keywords. So this keyword can actually also help you learn more about what the paper will talk about. This is the introduction. And well, the methods, sometimes methods are called materials and methods, especially in preclinical studies. And results and discussion can actually be together, but sometimes they're also divided into two sections. It doesn't really matter as long as all the things that needs to be explained in the results and discussion are explained. And there should also be a conclusion, but sometimes conclusion is not really in a research paper. And it's also very important for you to appraise the acknowledgement and conflict of interest, because well, if there's a conflict of interest, there can be bias in reporting, etc. And you can report that in your review article as well. And this is the tools I just mentioned. It's more for systematic review articles. And lastly, after you do critical appraisal, you need to also do a data extraction. So you need to summarize what data you get from each of the study you included in your review articles. So usually I use tables. It helps a lot. You can use an Excel basically. So what table I usually use is as follows. So the table usually contain a column about the study name. Usually I just write the first author name and the year of publication, and then the study design, and also the sample. And usually I divide it, like the number of sample and who are the sample, and also what are the interventions, and also the finding, where's the location, because usually it's also relevant. And you can also add notes in your Excel, because, well, sometimes there are important informations that you can not include in the table for the results, but you can include for the discussion because it's interesting for the discussion. For example, when I wrote about, for example, if you're writing about female genital mutilation and the factors that influence the psychological outcomes, I once wrote about it. There are some notes that I wrote that, so I found that they are strongly influenced by culture, but at the same time, sometimes it's positive. It's instead positive psychological response instead of negative. And I couldn't really include the positive, the reasoning behind the positive response in the table, because, well, and so I included it in the notes. It's something like that. I think it's a very rough explanation, but I hope you got what I mean. So basically, notes is something that you cannot include in your table, but you can include for discussion and during your writing. And so after you do all of them, the next step is to start writing. And for that, you first need to know the structure of a literature review. It's basically the same as a research review, a research article. But in narrative review, methods are optional. If you want to include it, you don't need to include the tool you use for critical appraisal. You don't need to also specify the keywords you use, but you can just write that you look for research articles in database A, B, and C with a combination of keywords, etc. In systematic review, it's important to precisely copy all the keywords. If not in the methods section, then it should be in the supplements, because we want people to be able to replicate our search strategy. So that's what also makes narrative review differ from other types of review. And for results and discussion, my suggestion is to break into thematic areas. I will show you later an example of this. And in this section, you synthesize important information from the article sources based on the table that you've made before. And to make this paper interesting, you can acknowledge controversies and insert questions, issues of bias, and differing opinions. So because we want to not only summarize, once again, we want to also analyze the issue. And these are one of the ways to analyze it. And lastly, you can conclude your article with firstly, state your main argument and give recommendations on research, further research that can be done in this topic. And I have some tips as well. So the review should be focused. It should be specific, like I mentioned before, but it should be relevant to a broad audience because we want to have a lot of readers, right? And in order for it to be broad, to be relevant to broad audience, we can include diverse subtopics. So for example, if we're back to the gene therapy example, well, gene therapy is a very hot topic. We can scrutinize it from a pharmacogenomic perspective and also ethical perspective, and ethical issues may be interesting for law professors, law students, and we can also delve deeper into the economic implications. For example, for developing countries, will they be able to provide gene therapy to their communities, something like that. So it can also be relevant for health economists. So by So this is actually why being specific is important, because if you're specific on a topic, then you can scrutinize the topic in different ways. And so it will be relevant not only for a certain audience, like for medical doctors, for example, but also to other audience like lawyers and like I mentioned, health economists, etc. And you need to be critical and consistent. So this can be done by read and rereading what you wrote, because sometimes you can have differing arguments if you're tired at writing. So you need to ensure that you are consistent. And a way to make your review to be more interesting and easier to understand by the readers is to summarize your findings using tables and diagrams. So that's why it's very important to use tables in data extraction, is to ensure that you don't work twice. You don't waste your work in data extraction, because you can directly use the table for it in your writing. And of course, lastly, it's very important to always ask for feedbacks. If you're still a student or early career researcher, it's also very beneficial to also include mid-career or late career professionals, such as your lecturers, because they have experiences and they can provide you with very constructive feedbacks. And well, this is about a diagram. So this is a diagram I made about the mechanisms that are being used currently in gene therapy to treat Angelman syndrome. So, well, you can design this a diagram like this with a lot of tool, basically the tool that you are familiar with, or you can familiarize yourself actually if you are willing to learn more about it. I strongly suggest that you learn more about it because it's an investment. I made this solely with PowerPoint, but I imagine it will be easier if I use Photoshop instead. And in making a diagram, you need to ensure that it's clear. So for example, if you use a pointer, well, in this diagram, I have different types of pointer. They can be, they have different shapes, and I can ensure that I have a legend here that make it easier to understand what this different shapes means. And also the diagram, especially if you're making a diagram that explains a physiological or a process, you want to also ensure that it's easily understood. So for example, if you're making membrane, then you can make the membrane to look as membrane, if you know what I mean, something like that. And if you're making a chromosome, then you make a real chromosome. Although of course you can also make diagrams only with like a chart, with only rectangles and informations in it. It's usually used in public health papers, so it's fine as well, as long as you can ensure that everyone reading it can understand it. So that's why feedbacks is once again important. And lastly, you need to also be careful not to reproduce or edit diagram without obtaining appropriate license. So sometimes you can actually edit a diagram from a source, but you need to take a look carefully into the licensing. Some diagrams are free to use directly without mentioning the reference, or perhaps you can mention the reference and you are free to edit and modify it without paying. Sometimes you need to pay, and sometimes you cannot edit it at all. You can just say that you reproduce it from, not reproduce, you can just say that you get this diagram from this reference, something like that. And lastly, in writing, you need to also sort your references because review articles need a lot of references. Like I mentioned, mini reviews need 80 references, and it's a lot even more for literature review articles. I strongly suggest to use a reference manager. This is Mendeley, but you can also use Zotero, EndNote, and other types of reference manager that you are more familiar with. It allows you to firstly document the articles that you are including, and usually this reference manager also have like an automated um, well, automated system that can allow you to directly write your references. So they write the references for you, so you don't need to write it. And it's very versatile in terms of ensuring that the type and format of your references are in accordance of the journal. Because when you are submitting, then there's a writing format in different journals, and each journal can have different reference format. So one journal can have Vancouver, another journal can have American Medical Association or AMA, etc. And reference manager greatly helps you in that, because they can just convert directly one type of reference to other type of reference format. And this is an example of my review article. So in the introduction, I write the aim in the last paragraph of the introduction. And the methods, I mentioned a bit about the inclusion criteria, the mesh terms I use, but not really the detailed Boolean terms I use, and how do we select the articles, but just like a brief writing about it. And then these are the results. And in the discussion, we focus on the current issues hindering the current therapy, and how can gene therapy strategies improve the situation. And at the same time, we also scrutinize on how gene therapy is still in early stage of developments, and also its other limitations, such as how it is bound by critical period. And also we also work on the pharmacoeconomics aspect of it, and also the ethical considerations. And this is our conclusion. So I have also here prepared some topics that you can consider. This is more gender related, but well, you can look here that women's health can be a topic that you can consider. You can also consider to write about COVID-19. So for example, gender in COVID-19, but also of course, treatment in COVID-19, diagnosis in COVID-19, and you can write about healthcare workforce. So in terms of gender, there's an ongoing gender inequality. Climate change and health, it's one of the top 10 problems, I think, considered by the WHO. So you can write about it. And these are my sources. So you want to learn more about this one is the sources for the gender and global health research. And this one is about literature review. So if you want to learn more about it, please look into the sources. And thank you. Sorry if there is anything that is unclear, and I'm now open for questions. So you can contact me here on Facebook, Instagram, or my personal email.
Okay, thank you so much, Adriana. Please, if you have questions, you can raise your hand or you put it down on that doc.
Yes, you can type your questions in the chat directly. I think I can directly.
Good evening. Good evening.
Okay, I think some people raise their hand.
Yes, good evening.
Good evening. Thank you.
Please, I want you to explain the difference between systematic review and systematic literature review and meta-analysis. I want to get the direct meaning of systematic review and systematic literature review and meta-analysis. Please, can you explain further on these two?
Thank you very much for your question. So basically, the differences lies in the statistical analysis. So systematic review is basically a narrative review with a comprehensive method and also critical appraisal that uses tools. But with meta-analysis, we take a step further, aside of making sure that its method is clear. We also further summarize the result into a statistical analysis. So I think I can show you an example. So basically in original research, I think we all know that we should use statistical analysis. In meta-analysis, we also use a statistical analysis to summarize the result of the articles that we included. So for example, in a systematic review, we can include 8 cohort studies with different results. But they're all talking about the impact of drug A to preeclampsia. And we want to summarize how is it impactful to preeclampsia. So what we use is we do a statistical analysis, and then we can see figure like this. So, well, I don't think time allows to explain the in-depth statistical analysis for meta-analysis, but what you need to know is that you can use a tool. So for example, an original research article, the tool you're using is like SPSS, if you're familiar with it, or R, basically tool for original research analysis. You can also use a tool like that for meta-analysis. Usually what's used is RefMan manager, reference manager. I think it's REFMAN. I think you can look for it in Google, and you can familiarize yourself with it. And basically how we summarize it in a nutshell is that we firstly weight each study. So for example, study A perhaps have larger participants, so they are more, so their result is more, how do you say it, is more influential compared to another study, something like that. And after that, well, in a nutshell, it's summarizing the references, the results of the references into one result. So for example, if you can see here, this is about mean difference in water intake. So it shows that based on all these included articles, higher intake and intervention is more significant compared to lower intake and intervention, something like that. And well, I think that this also brings another question to it, and that is, well,
She doesn't have time again.
sorry?
Yeah.
Okay.
A lot of questions. I said a lot of questions. Can you say the questions?
Sorry?
I say some people ask questions on this one, chat box.
Oh yeah, there is. I will answer it after this one, I think. Yeah, I would just like to add about the meta-analysis is that each studies, of course, have different places they are being done at, and they have different participants. And so in meta-analysis, we also need to show the heterogeneity of the studies. So basically, so there are basically two things that you need to analyze, I think. The first one is the results. So you need to come with a summarized results for all the studies. And the second one is you need to also show the differences within the studies, because in meta-analysis, we are sort of showing that this study is, all of these studies are the same study, but the real fact is that it's not. There are different studies and they have different confounding factors and they are heterogeneous to each other. And so another analysis that we should do is to also analyze the heterogeneity of the articles. So it's with an I-square. So basically at the end product of meta-analysis is to show the summarized research, the summary of those research with a number, while at the same time entering to show that this number is a result of a number of studies and hence it can be heterogeneous. But of course, a good meta-analysis have a low heterogeneity. I know that some articles can reach almost 0% heterogeneity, and that can be achieved if you have a robust inclusion and exclusion criteria. So if you are so if you ensure that inclusion and exclusion criteria are specific, then of course the heterogeneity will decrease, because you're ensuring that they all have a specific set of interventions and conditions in their studies. It's something like that. I hope it's quite clear. Do you have any other questions? Okay, if not, now we'll go to the next question. It's from Ridwan, I think. So, well, the standard format of table used in research is, there's no standard format at all. You can use any kind of table based on your review. So based on your topic, you're the one who write it, so you're the one who know which table should be used. But generally, we have a table about study characteristics. So you need to include informations about what study you included. And that generally includes study, the study name, of course, like, for example, Miranda et al. 2020, and then also the study design, location, the number of participants, and the interventions they're doing. And then you can have information about the results in the same table, or you can further make another table further summarizing the results. So for example, if you are writing about factors that influence preeclampsia, you can, well, different studies can show that there are multiple factors. You can have another table which shows that, well, factor A is explained in 3 research studies. Factor B is explained in 8 studies, to show, just to show in more concise way what the factors are, something like that. I hope it's quite clear. And for Udoji. Udoji, there's a question about a literature review by an individual. What is the acceptance rate? So generally speaking, in writing a research article or even a commentary, a letter to editor, your credentials is always seen. So they generally see your degree. So some journals, especially the more prestigious ones, ask for your degree and also your affiliations. And they can also look for your your experience. So if a review is written by an individual, the acceptance rate depends on who the individual is. Is that article, is the topic of the article their expertise or not? So I think if you are an early career researcher, it's better to collaborate with someone who has more experience. Although in my case, I actually once got a publication where all the writers are students. I was a fourth year medical student, or I think 4 or 5 for a fifth year medical student when the article was published. So I don't say that it's impossible, but it certainly heightens your chance to get accepted if you include someone professionals. And unless you are already a professional with a lot of experiences, I don't really suggest you to write a review individually. And even in my case, when I got a paper published by all students, there were 3 authors there. So the 3 authors were all students. And in review articles, because it's a long article, having more authors actually have its own benefits in terms of, it can be more longer, the analysis can be more robust, something like that. So yeah, I hope that answers your question. And the next question is about, while reading a journal for your review, is it a must that you read everything in the journal, or are there some tips to fast read a journal? Okay, so ideally you should read everything, but of course sometimes it's not possible, especially if your included articles reaches like 30 to 35. So, it can be tiring to read all of it, but ideally you should. My tip would be to first fast read, and then you can read the article more in depth later. And the tip to fast read the journal is to first do critical appraisal. So you just need to look into the things that you need for critical appraisal, and that most of them are in the aim. So in the last part of the introduction, the methods, you need to read all parts of the methods so you can scrutinize about it, and the results. So those 3 are the most important parts of a journal article that you should read for fast reading. And most of the time you can already get everything you need for your review by just reading the 3 of them. And of course, you can always get some more information if you also read the discussion section, because they will also write about their reasoning, what they think might be the reason of why the outcomes is like that. And you can include that in your discussion as well. So yeah, while fast reading can be a skill, it's truly important to also read everything if you are available to do it. And the next question is from Ubu Charity. So how do we cite a word properly while writing? So for that, I usually use a reference manager. That's the best way to do it, because reference manager, they come with a tool to directly cite in text. So not only can you make your references automatically later, but you can also directly cite there. So I think you can look, I usually use Mendeley. They have a Word tool, so tool for Microsoft Word, and they allow us to pick a certain button for each of our sentence if we want to cite an article, and then we just need to look for that article in the search engine that they have, and then we can press the article that we want, so that the article is automatically cited. So that's why reference manager is very important. And I hope that answers the question. And so the next question is from Adituru. So about referencing, APA style is not always the best way of referencing. I think it differs between fields. For example, in medicine, Vancouver is actually the most used style, Vancouver style, but you need to refer to the journal again. So my suggestion is, if you want to pick a topic, then you can also already look into some journals that you are interested in, because by doing so, you can look into the format that they're asking, and you can ensure that they're similar. But I think APA, writing firstly in APA style is quite fresh style. It's used in a lot of journals as well, and you can just change it later, especially if you use reference manager. It won't be a big issue. And yeah, I think that's all from the questions. So do you have any other questions? Well, I think we have to go on to the next part soon. So if you have any other questions, feel free to message me on my email. So I will write the email here. And I will write my research articles here. I will in the chat box as well. I think someone asked for it. So thank you very much once again for the opportunity. And I'm sorry if there's some mistakes that I made, but I hope that you all can have got some important things that can help kickstart your research journey. And lastly, I would like to also, I think there's someone here that also write that there should be platforms for mentorship for women in research and for research in general. And my last key takeaway is that there are a lot of networks already about it. You can always search for it, and one of which is Global Health Focus. We're always open for more members. So if you are interested, feel free to message me as well. And we are more than ready to learn with you all. So thank you once again, and see you soon in another occasion. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. All right, we are back again. I think our second facilitator is here already. Frankine, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you, Favor. I can barely hear you. I guess you're far from the mic.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you now. All right, I guess the moderator is having issues with her network or something.
Okay, sir. I said you should start your presentation.
All right, thank you very much. Yeah, hello, good evening, everyone. I'm so excited to be here. Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak with young researchers. Let me share my slide. All right, I'm speaking on the topic research writing and publications. My name is Kenneth Beatrice Davy, and I've been opportune to conduct some research works as well as make publications with my mentors and my mentees. I was able to mentor young researchers in different capacities under the cover of different organizations. And on the Farm of Fluence, we have some research interns who have been working with me for a while now. And luckily for us, Obianuju Favor is one of them. We also have Success David from University of Nigeria, Nsukka. We have Anekan Etesin, a medical student from University of Uyo. We have Samuel Akai, microbiology student, Kaduna State University. We have David Adadlek, a Kaduna State University student, and a whole lot of things. So I was very excited when I was invited for this topic, because when we have more of young researchers, the research world would actually be a nice place. All right, after conducting a research, after reviewing a lot of literature, the next thing is writing everything that you've done, like reporting them. And how you report them really, really means a lot. So you can have a very wonderful research work, but if the writing skill is not adequate, then you may not be able to get the desired outcome. So in this paper, we'll be looking at how to write a scientific paper and any and any format that needs to be followed. Now, as we know, as we all know, we have different types of writing, different types. So the way you write for a magazine publication would be different from the way you write for an essay for maybe admission or something, or scholarship application. So the way you write a research paper is actually different. So research paper should be written in a concise form, and it should be very clear. It should be devoid of ambiguity. And a research paper, it shows everything about the research. It shows the motivation for doing the experiment and the method that you used and the results obtained. Now, after writing about the result, you need to tell us the implication of the result. What does it mean? Then, if you look at most of the research papers available online, you will see that all of them have a particular format, and this helps you to present your information clearly and very concise. So the general organization is like this, although you may have an instruction that says you should modify it. So the first one is the abstract. After the abstract, you have the introduction, you have methodology, you have the result section, you have discussion, you have conclusion and references. Usually the abstract is like it's like the general overview of the manuscript. It's the overview, it's like the summary of everything. So the abstract contains the introduction, tells us what the result is all about, the research is all about, the objective of conducting the research, the method you use, the result obtained, and what is the implication of the results. So an abstract is an overview of everything, of introduction, method, results, and discussion. And all this would be written in a concise manner, and it should be very clear. It should not be too verbose. It should be written using the minimum letters or minimum words available. So we look at them one by one. An abstract is the shortened version of the paper and should contain all information necessary for the reader to, one, determine what the objectives of the studies were. So this one means that it's the introduction, how the study was done, the method, what results were obtained, the results section, and the significance of the results, which is the discussion section. So an abstract is the overview of everything about the paper in a shortened form. Although it appears as the first section of the paper, most researchers write the abstract last. And the abstract should be written in an interesting manner because most of the databases that index research articles, they only index only the abstract. And if you've reviewed the paper before, you would see that it is only the abstract that will be sent to you. So if the abstract is not written well, and the introduction, methodology, results were well written, the whole aim of writing is not achieved. So the abstract is very, very important, and writing good abstracts is a skill. So the more you write and the more you listen to like feedback from the reviewers, the more your writing skill will be fine-tuned. Then the next one is the introduction. Introduction is like introducing the topic as well as reviewing all the literature. So you've actually learned about literature review, so you also apply it here. So the introduction section tells us why the study is of scientific interest and what are the objectives. Then this section also discusses the results and conclusions of other works that have already made available either online or offline. And this helps us to explain why the current research of scientific interest. So this is like the literature review. Then the introduction is organized to move from general information to specific information. Now let's assume you want to conduct a study that maybe analyze a particular thing happening in a society. Now you may actually talk about it maybe in the world perspective, then now move to the nation, then the states, then the locality. Okay. Then the introduction should also be limited. It should be limited to studies that are related directly to the present study, and you should emphasize the specific contribution to the research work that you're conducting right now. Then usually the last sections of the introduction part should be a statement about the objective of the study and the statement of hypothesis. This would like tell us that, okay, this study is being conducted to determine this, and that. Now this helps us to this helps us to have a transition to the next section, which is methodology, in which we explain how you meet your objectives as well as test your hypothesis. And the next one is the method and material section. This indicates all the methodological details necessary for another scientist to duplicate your work. Now then it should be a narrative of the steps you took in your experiment or your study, not a list of instructions such as you might or find in a cookbook. Now, if you want to write the methodology, maybe if you look at a laboratory manual, you see that you say, okay, add 2 mils of maybe sodium hydroxide to the solution. So your methodology, you not write like that. You use passive voice. 2 mils of sodium hydroxide was added to the solution, and this, and that. So it should be a narration, not writing it exactly as it is in the manual or anything that you're using. Then an important part of writing a scientific paper is actually deciding what bit of information needs to be given in details. You should not write everything that's available in the manual. Actually, there are actually things that can be overlooked. There are lots of things that can be overlooked. Now, take for instance, you don't need to start telling us how you're able to measure 1 ml of sodium hydroxide, take for instance, except if it's very, very delicate. Okay, everyone knows how. So you can just say 1 ml of sodium hydroxide was measured using this apparatus, and there's no need to go into details. So you need to know which information you need to include and which information you need to omit. Then the next one is results, is the result section. This present the results of the experiment, but does not attempt to interpret their meaning. As with the method section, we need to know which information to include and which information not to include. Raw data should not be included. Rather, you should write the summary of everything, either in tables, figures, or text. And use the text of the paper to state the results of your study, then refer the reader to a table or figure where they can see the data for themselves. Now, take for instance, you have a table. Maybe table 2 shows the average of tablets used in a particular experiment. So in your results section, you now say, okay, maybe table 2 below shows the relative mean, okay, the mean weight of tablets used in particular things. So you need to mention the particular table and what it contains, and a legend must also be included. Then number tables and figures separately beginning with number 1. So the first table that you have, it will be table 1. The next one you have will be table 2. The next one you have will be table 3, and so on and so forth. If it's a diagram, it should be figure 1, 2, 3, and the rest. So, and again, you should not attempt to evaluate the results in this session. You should report only what you found. Every discussion should be at the discussion section. So you must refer to the text, to each figure or table in the paper. Then the next one is discussion. Discussion is very, very critical. If you are in a higher institution, you agree with me that the discussion section carries more mark than the introduction or results section. So in this session, you explain everything about the results and why they're actually different from what you expect or what other people have done. You should interpret the results in light with other published results by adding additional information. Information, must make sure that the citations are accurate. Then, now after conducting the research, you obtain your results. Okay, so okay, this is what this result. So now relates your work with the objective and the questions that you raised in the introduction section. However, do not restate the objective. Make the statement that synthesize all the evidence. Then you should limit your conclusion to those which your data actually support. Then at the end of the discussion, you now include maybe recommendation for other researchers to use. In discussion section, you explain every disparity. Now let's assume 1 plus 1 is equal to 2, but you, after conducting your research, discover that 1 plus 1 is not 2. It's actually showing you maybe 4 or 5. Then you report it as it is. Don't manipulate any data. This is one of the most important research ethics that you all need to know. Data manipulation is illegal, whether the data is actually what you expect or you don't expect. To report how you see it. Then you try to justify the reason why you obtained that. Then after discussion section, then the conclusion and the references. Now we have different types of reference pattern. It can be APA, it can be MLA, it can be Harvard. So make sure you follow the instruction of the journal or the university that instructs you to do it. So that is it. Now, after conducting that, now the next thing is to publish it. Now, one of the main importance of research is to provide a new information. So if a new information is provided, you need to make it available for other people to read. Now, it can be made available either through attending conferences. It can be made available through, let's say, journal publication and any other means. Okay, so when you're done writing the research paper, and deep down you feel that it's actually worth publishing, and the next step is to submit it for publication, either to a conference or a journal or a book editor. But what we'll be looking at here is only submission to journals, but all of them are actually related. Then the processes are like this. First of all, you need to identify a journal that you need to submit it to. 2, you need to follow the instruction of the journal. 3, you need to submit the paper. Then 4, you need to understand the decision process. Now, okay, once you make the submission, it may not be accepted like that, you get. So you may have either accept, reject, and some other things. Then if the decision is that you should revise the paper, so here we look at how to revise the paper. Then you answer any query that the editor asks or the reviewer, then proofs, how to review it. So the first one, like I said, is identifying it, target journal. This is very, very difficult. This is where most young researchers make mistakes. Let me say something. Once you make a submission to a journal, you cannot make that same submission to another journal unless the other journal says no, or if it rejects the manuscript. But once the manuscript is under review, you cannot submit it to another journal. And once it has been published, you cannot make another publication. So you need to be very careful as to the type of journal that you make the submission to. This is actually because we have those that are not good journals. I call them predictory journals. They lure you into submitting your manuscript to them, and at the end of the day, your work will not be reviewed properly, and the quality of the paper will not be standard. So you need to be very, very careful. So we have a lot of guidelines that you can look out for. So let's see what they are. First of all, you need to match between the subject of your article and the journal's aim and scope. If your research is about, let's say, respiratory COVID-19, now if you want to make the submission, you need to look for journals that have scope or aim related to either respiratory medicine or respiratory pharmacology or either global health, public health, and the rest. It would be very unwise for you to have maybe a science-related project and you are now making the submission to an accounting-related journal. It won't really be of any advantageous to you. Then the next one is, what is the readership at the target audience? Who normally read the journals? Is it students? Is it professionals or what? Then is journal highly visible? Now, visibility of journals can be found through their indexing mechanisms. So if you look at a journal, you look at the website databases that journal is being indexed with is good or if it is not good. Okay, also sorry for the break in transmission. Now, is the journal highly visible? Now, the visibility of the journal can be determined or predicted through the indexing of the journal. So any journal that is indexed to PubMed or Scopus or any other highly visible database, that means the visibility is very good. But if you look at the databases or the indexing of the journal and you can't see anything that's highly visible, just know that your research article may not be read by a lot of individuals. Even if they search related topics, your paper may not be visible. And at the end of the day, maybe in years, in 1 year, you can discover that you are the only one that have read maybe you and the other co-authors are the only ones that must have read the paper. And this is not really good for you because the major aim of conducting research is to share the information to other people, with other people. Then what is the CV value of the publication? Like I made mention earlier, any publication made to predatory journal and that is not really really strict with the whole review review process, it will not add much value to the CV. It will not be considered. So look at the CV value of the publication before you make the submission. Then the next one is what is the journal's turnaround time? Turnaround time is the time it takes for you to make the submission and also get a feedback. So now, if you want to make a submission, okay, let's assume you want to make an application for a scholarship, and one of the requirements is for you to have at least a joint publication. If you want to make the submission, you now look at turnaround time of the journal. If it is long, I've seen manuscripts that were submitted, let's say in 2008, and it was accepted in 2009 or even 2010. So that is not really good for you. So just look at the editions and the volumes. Now, editions implies that, okay, how many years have they been publishing? Edition, that means how many years have okay, how many years have they been publishing? Now, volume refers to in a year, how many times have they made the publication? I'll take, for instance, I and some colleagues now start a journal, and okay, the whole channel now manuscripts now were now accepted since 2018. Now, 2018, any manuscript accepted in 2018 will be in the first edition. Then, how many times have we released like different copies of the journal in a year? That's the number of volumes. So if this one, that is maybe season edition 1, volume 1. Now the second one in that same year will be edition 1, volume 2. And the third one will be edition 1, volume 3. So the second in 2019, it's now be edition 2. So the first one that year will be volume 1, second one will be volume 2, and the rest. So just look at all these things to help you navigate. Then this is like the summary of the checklist. And does the subject of your article match the journal subject focus? Is it related? Now, does the journal accept the article type you intend to submit? Now, we have different types of research papers. We have letters to the editors. We have original research papers. We have review papers. We have opinions and the rest. So if you write, let's say, a letter to the editor, you need to check and be sure that the article type is accepted by the intended journal. Then the next one is the journal read by the target audience? If you want, if you conduct a research for only the students, I want only the students. So look for a journal that has the target audience as a student. The next one is, does the journal have an online edition, or is everything offline, only hard copies are available? These are the things you need to check. Then what is the impact factor of the journal? Then is the journal regarded as prestigious one in its field? What is the turnaround time for articles submitted to the journal? How many times a year is the journal published? And so on and so forth. So make sure you adhere to the checklist. It will actually guide you to make the right selection. Then another thing is the instruction by the journal. Instruction is very, very important. Read the instruction to authors before you start your paper. Now regard them while writing the paper and actually check them again before you submit. Look at some recent issues of the journals. If you do that, it will actually help you to make your paper a very nice one. Then, okay, these are some of the questions that the instructions may answer. What are the categories of articles accepted by the journal? What is the maximum length of article? Is it 1,000 words? Is it 500 words? Is it 1,500 words? Is it 4,000 words? And the next one is, what is the maximum length of abstracts? Like I said, abstract is the shortened version of your whole work. So it can be 250 words, it can be 200 words, it can be 300 words, it can be 350 words. So you need to follow the instruction of the journal. If the journal says that the maximum length of abstract should be 300 and your own abstract has 320 or so, it may be rejected. Then what section should the article include? Like I mentioned earlier about the format, the abstract, the introduction, the methodology, the result, and the result, discussion, and conclusion. So look at the instruction by the journal and adhere strictly. Then how many figures and tables are allowed? What are the requirements for them? Then in what format should the papers appear? Should references appear? Is it the APA referencing style? Is it MLA? Is it Harvard or what? So make use of make sure you read the instruction and adhere strictly to them. Then after adhering to the instruction, the next one is, how do you submit the paper? Initially, most of the submissions are by email. You just send the email to the editor. But now most of the journals have a well-organized website that accepts electronic submissions. Then you need to include a cover letter. So whether it's an electronic submission or a submission by mail, a cover letter is important. And cover letter would inform the editor about the research, of what it's aimed at, then who are the editors, then just try to tell them why it is relevant for them to accept, or why they should consider your research work for publication. Then if there's any other form that is attached, you need to complete it, you and your co-authors. Then after making the submission, now the journal editor will now screen your manuscripts for appropriateness of subject matter to see that, okay, is it in line? Are you submitting a research work that is in our scope? Like I mentioned earlier, you submitting something related to, let's say, respiratory medicine to an accounting journal, it will be rejected. So the editor will now look at the appropriateness of the subject matter. Then the editor will actually check, are the instruction being complied with? Did you follow the instruction? Then you also look at the general quality of the paper, but most of the case, now the editor does not reject the paper here at this point. It is only if the paper is not written well that it can be rejected at this point, but most of the times it will be sent to the next stage, which is peer review. Peer review, as the name implies, other people will review your work, other experts in that field will review your work so as to help them to assist the editor to decide whether to publish the paper or not, and also to help the author improve the paper, whether or not the journal accepts it. So even if the review, even if the feedback from the reviewers are bad, accept it in good faith and work on it and make sure that the paper is improved. Then the reviewers now make a decision. Either one, to accept without revision. That means the manuscript will be accepted as it is, although this is very, very rare. Most of the time they'll say, okay, accept with minor revisions, and the revisions can be either minor or major. So then the next one will be revised, major changes. So here you have to write a lot of things. You have to change a lot of things about the paper, or it can be minor revisions, like I mentioned earlier. Then the final one in most cases is rejection. So discouragement to resubmit after extensive reviews and addition of new experimental data to address the issues in the manuscript. So the decisions can either be accepted without revision, accepted minor revisions, or revised major revision, accepted major revisions, or reject. So it's expected that we work towards like having decisions that are accepted with minor revisions. Then how is the paper being revised? Now the goal is to improve the paper and actually get it accepted for publication. So as soon as you receive a feedback from the reviewers, you need to revise and submit immediately. Yes. Then the next one is include a letter saying what revisions were made. If you revised a list of requested revision, address each of them in the letter. Now, the reviewers are not really perfect, so they may make a mistake. So if you disagree with the requested revision, explain why you disagree with that in your letter. Then you find a different way to solve the problem that the editor or the reviewer have already identified. Then most of the time also the reviewers would, or the editor will like ask you something, okay, this is not clear, you should do this, do that, remove this, add this address. So the queries could be as a result of inconsistencies, or when some information are missing, or when there are inambiguities, or when there are lots of ambiguous statements. So my advice for you is that respond promptly, immediately, politely, and concisely. Then after responding to the editor will now either accept or reject. So now if the editor accepts it, authors will now be sent proofs of their manuscripts, but only changes to the title, author list, spelling, grammar, formatting, or scientific errors will be permitted. All corrections are, so after reviewing everything, can you hear me? Hello? Yeah, where did I stop? Their favor.
Yes, we can hear you.
All right, I said, where did I stop? My network had an issue earlier, so I didn't know where I stopped. So after reviewing the gallery proof, maybe you've made changes to maybe the title, the list of authors, maybe some spelling issues, and maybe some scientific errors. Then the editor will now accept the research work formally, and subsequently afterwards, a PDF file will be sent to you either in the next couple of days or weeks. And shortly afterwards, it can now be indexed. If it's PubMed index journal, it will now be like indexed on PubMed databases. It's Google Scholar, it will be available on Google Scholar and the rest. So with this is the summary of everything. Do look into whether the journal has page charges or submission fees or any other thing. It will not be nice for you to make a submission, do all the process, and when it's
Sir,
accepted. Yeah, hello?
sir, sir,
Yeah,
we can't see your screen again.
okay. Thank you. Hold on,
We
I'm
can't
coming.
see your screen.
All right, let me share my screen.
Yes. Okay, sir. Thank you. Okay.
Yeah, are you there? So one other thing is that you need to actually look out for the application processing charge. Okay, you need to actually look out if submission to the journal is free or you need to pay for something. Most of us young researchers, we don't have money. So we look out for journals that either accept a very little amount of money as as the APC, or those that actually publish for free. So we just have to be careful so that we will not be, be victim of predatory publishing. Then your cover letter should include the name of the manuscript, the name of the authors, academic degrees you've obtained, your position, affiliation, which institution are you affiliated to, your address, the address of the institution, your phone number or your email address. Then usually when the editor makes a decision, most of the time it should not be taken too literally. So sometimes edition will look like we can only accept the paper after major revisions. So if you receive something like that, it means that you have a hope. That means after revising the manuscript, it will be accepted. Then the next one, it could also be that your paper is not acceptable in its current form. Should you choose to revise your paper? So if you see something like that, it's also a good news. That means you just have to revise the paper, then resubmit. Now, all the statements will just encourage you to revise as soon as you can, as well as resubmit. Then you all need to know that once you make a submission to a journal, you cannot resubmit the same manuscript to another journal. It has to be after you must have received a decision, whether an acceptance or a rejection. So if it is rejected, that's when you have the right to now make another submission to another different journal. Then one other thing is that you can, so like even after publishing research work in a journal, it can still be submitted. The abstract can still be submitted for a conference publication. Okay, so even if you have published work already and there's a conference and you want to maybe share your results with other researchers, you can do that. The law just states that you should not make the same publication in more than one journal. With this, I've come to the end of the presentation. If you have any question, you can ask. Thank you very much. Is there any question? All right, I think Emanuela has a question. Go ahead.
Yes. Emmanuel,
Emanuela, your question. Okay. How do you know the target audience of a prospective journal? So let me wait for the second question. All right, now, so for the first one, how do you know the target audience of a prospective journal? So now most of the journals would have, if you look at the name, you know really what it's meant for. It can be Nigerian Journal of maybe Pharmacology, Asian Journal of this, Journal of Reproductive Medicine. So if you look at this thing, you just know that it actually specialized in that will most likely read the journal. Then if it is for students or like something related to education, you may do well to submit it to journals that have names and scopes that are related to education, like the FIP, International Federation of Pharmacists. It has like most of the journals there are related to this pharmacy education. They also have some journals meant by students. The editors are actually students, most of the reviewers are students, and the rest is meant for students. So depending on what your research is all about, you have to look at the journal, get the title and the scope, so that you know that if the target audience would be met. Then the next one is, what do you mean by revising a paper? Now, like I made mention earlier, I said immediately after submitting your research, your manuscript, the editor will look at it for either appropriation of subject matter as well as the quality. Now, after the editor must have looked at it and said, okay, it is it's in line with the scope of the journal, and you've adhered to the instruction. The next one will be peer review. And the peer review means that other experts in your field will look at it and now make recommendations. So it can be that you must have made some mistakes while typing. So the reviewers would say, okay, instead of this, maybe change it to this, or they can say, explain this one more. So after everything, after all the reviewers must have made their own comments and the paper is being sent back to you, you are now to revise it. Now, revision means you addressing the issues being raised by the reviewers. I hope that is okay. Is that okay? Hello, Chidera. Sorry, Emanuela. All right, thank you. So the next one is Chidera asks, how can your work be made more visible? Because I didn't get the in-text thing that was explaining. Okay. So your work can be more visible through indexing. So if you want to make assumption to any journal, look at the databases that the journal is being indexed to. If it is PubMed, it's really, really visible, highly, highly visible. Okay, any PubMed index journal is very visible, and most of them. Then another one is Google Scholar. Then another database is ResearchGate. Another database is maybe Scopus. So you look at it, the higher the database is being indexed with the journal, better for you. It increases visibility. Then another thing you can do is like sharing your own work on ResearchGate. So if you're a researcher, I advise you to have a ResearchGate account as well as Google's Scholar account. So if you have those things, it actually helps in increasing the visibility of your work. They can also share it either on LinkedIn or on Twitter, okay, depending on what you want. Then is it possible for big organizations to accept my work as students? Sorry, I didn't get this. Is it possible for big organizations to accept my work as a student publishing her work? I'm actually interested in this and I do not know how to go about it. Sorry, when you say big organizations, what do you mean? Can you unmute your mic and say something? So be fast. Hello, Chidera. Big organizations, do you mean like big journals? All right. So in order not to waste time, I do not really get what she means by big organizations. Okay, but okay, whether it's a big organization or it's a big or it's a big okay, regardless of the journal or regardless of the organization, the major thing there is just the quality of the paper. Now, if the paper is of if it's well written and the content is rich, it can be accepted even when you are a student. I know of a lot of students that have made a lot of publications, even more than most of the lecturers, most of the professors that you see. So you being a student does not actually stop you from doing anything. All you need to do is have good mentors, write well, and and then send the work out for publication. Then the next one is in the general organization. In the general organization, how can you determine the method to use? Well, the method depends on what you did. So method means how did you arrive at your results? So it is not really specific to a particular format or so. It actually depends on what you used. What method was used? How did you arrive at your results? And the rest. Are you okay with the answer? Then the next one is, okay, Chidera said, okay, big journals like UNICEF. So being a student does not stop you, okay? In fact, what they are like after is just the quality of the work and maybe the core authors and the rest. So if you're really skeptical about like submitting a work to a big journal, so you can actually meet with another superior of yours who is also like an icon in the field and ask him to proofread the work and make his own comments you get, so that at the end of the day he'll be a co-author. So doing that would like increase the rate of acceptance. Then Mr. Ugu Charities, Miss Ugu Charities said, in writing, how can you carry out an in-text citation properly? Well, all right. So in-text citation is very important. And I don't think time would permit us to go through it or the medium. But then let me see if I can explain it. So if you are to make an in-text citation, let me work on my screen. Hold on, please. All right, let me edit this part that is for the purpose of the in-text citation. Now let's assume that I obtained this article from a research conducted by Miss maybe Ugu Charity. So let's say Ugu Charity, David, KB, Samuel, OD. It was conducted maybe in 2019 and the rest. So this is the title, maybe ABC, and the rest, and the rest, and the rest, okay? So now let's assume this is the reference. So if you want to make an in-text citation and the list names of authors are more than three and above, you write the name of, you write the surname of the first author. Let's say this is it, Ugu. You open the brackets, open bracket, Ugu. Now, like I said, if the number of authors are more than 2, then you write et al. Et al. Then you put full stop, comma, and now the year of the publishing, 2019. Okay, so the et al. Should be italicized. You italize it. Okay, so write Ugu, the name of the first, the surname of the first author, then et al. Since the authors are more than 2, then the year of the publication, and the et al. Should be italicized. But now let's assume that it's only 2 authors, okay? Let's assume it's only Ugu C and David KB. So if you want to write the in-text citation, it will now be, you open the brackets, let me use a red ink so you see it properly. Ugu and David, comma, 2019. Okay, so you just write the surname of the 2 authors and then the year. Ugu and David, 2019. Okay, but if it is only 1 author, let's assume it's Ugu only. So now the in-text citation will now be open brackets, Ugu, comma, 2019. That is all. Do you understand? So Ugu 2019, if it is only 1 author, if there are 2 authors, it will be Ugu, let's assume Ugu and David, comma, 2019. If there are more than 2, then it will be Ugu et al. Full stop, comma, 2019. Okay, and the et al. Should be in italics. So that is it. I hope this is able to answer the question. Okay. Are we okay? So this is if you have only 1 author. Here, if you have 2 authors, this way you have more than 2. All right. So let's look at the next one. Let me see. What are the requirements for becoming? So Emanuela asked also, what are the requirements of becoming one of the mentees? Well, I don't think there's any requirements. The only thing is that you just have to be passionate about what you do. Okay, you should know what you want and and I'm always available to help. But then there are other organizations that you can actually work with, like the Farmer Incubation Hub. If I'm part of the Farmer Incubation Hub, automatically they have a mentorship program. So you'll be linked with the mentors that have the same interest as you, and they can actually mentor you appropriately. And I've been a mentor with them. So I do have like yearly mentees. So if you want to be one of my mentees, you can just make a request to the person in charge. Then I'm always available. You can connect with me on LinkedIn or Facebook or Instagram, or you have my email and reach out to me and I can help in any capacity that I can. Then the next one is I was missing out of the first week. Oh, sorry, this is not for me. Then another one is when will certificates be given? Well, I don't know, but let me just say something about this. Now, certification is very, very good. Certification is very good. I'm very happy that you
No,
all will have. Yeah. So, okay, certificates are very, very good. It actually shows that it actually satisfies that you've been a part of a particular program or an event. But then I also want us to be more keen about the knowledge obtained, because I've seen some individuals that are just after after the certificate, they would like to have 100 certificates, 200 certificates, but the knowledge is very, very minimal. So in as much as certifications are good, we should also try as much as possible to obtain the skills, okay? All right, so that when we have an opportunity, we can actually apply all the things that we've learned. We can like defend the certificate as, okay, yes, I have a certificate on this and I'm able to do something with it. Then how am I going to write the reference from an article downloaded from WHO website in which the article itself has some references? Wali Yula answered. So now, can you hear me? So if you obtained, now let's assume you obtained like something from a WHO website. Let me cancel this. Now WHO is what? World Health Organization, right? World Health Organization. Okay. So if you want to cite that, let's say in text citation. Okay, let's assume the research was being conducted in 2019. Let's just use that as well. So in-text citation will be very simple. It's just WHO, 2019. That is all for the in-text citation. If you want to write the full reference, now WHO is a World Health Organization, right? So just depending on the format, if it is APA, now this is how you do it. If it is APA, this is how you write it. Now, the name of the organization, World Health Organization, which is WHO, open brackets, the year of publication 2019, full stop. Then the title of the article, it can be responses to COVID vaccine. Okay. Then the next one will now be what? Like the link where you obtained it. You can say retrieved from your website, which is https this and this and this and this. So who. Okay, this is how the website will look like. Okay, retrieve from this website, and you write the date, maybe on 19th of March 2022. Do you understand? Is that okay? And this is how you write the reference. Then if it is the in-text citation, this is how you write it. And now let's assume that the year of publication is not available. If you look at it, you don't know when the whole thing was written first. So all you need to do is to write ND here. ND. So ND means no dates. Okay. So you can just write retrieved from this, and this, and just put ND. So ND means that the date is not really verified. So you don't know when it was written originally. Okay. So you can just write here. You write ND here. So ND. So if you look at it, we know that okay, you don't know when it was written originally, but then you retrieved it on 19th of March 2022. So is that okay? Then the next one is in the general organization. Okay, you've answered already. Okay, another person asked that, okay, that what are the stages of writing the methodology steps? Methodology, like I said, okay, methodology contains either the material, both the materials as well as the materials as well as the method obtained. So there's no particular method, okay? But then let's just use this. Let's just use this as a general rule, not a rule per se. So like to write the name of maybe materials used, if the material used, if they then like any other thing, it depends on the research work that you're conducting. The materials you use, if it is, let's say you made use of test tubes, you made use of a measuring cylinder and the rest. Measuring cylinder, you made use of a UV spec or HPLC or a lot of things, any other thing. So there's no particular format of writing the methodology. It all depends on the instruction from the journal and what to conduct. Then another person asks of author of review article for any statement. Is it necessary to add all the other associate references also? No. Now if it is a review article, now let's assume the review article was written by let's say David et al. Okay, let's assume the review article was written by David et al. Maybe David KB, ABC, ABCD, etc. Okay, so now if you read the review article and you find something of interest that David et al. Wrote, if you want to write it in your in-text citation or in your list of references, it will only be David et al. Okay, but if if on the review article, you now find out that David et al. now cited another researcher, okay? If David et al. Cited another researcher, let's say, okay, let's say this is the article, the review article. It says that CHANET is an organization in West Africa. Okay, and this statement was written by Eric D in 2019. Okay, so now let's assume this is the review article written by David et al. And the rest. Okay, and then in the review article, you now discover that there's a statement that you like and you want. Okay, so CHANET is an organization in West Africa. Now, this one was being written by Eric D. So the credit to be given to Eric D and not David. This is David et al. Anything cited means that it was written by the cited these authors. But now let's assume that there's no in-text citation here. So we just assume that now the statement was being written by David et al. So your in-text citation, you write like David et al. Instead, okay? But if there's an in-text citation out, like this immediately after a statement, write down the reference of the cited author. Is that okay? Is there a difference between review article and a meta-analysis? Now, basically, review articles involves you to involves you to do a meta-analysis. So most meta-analytical papers are review articles. Okay, meta-analysis is a form of review. So yes, yeah, there's a difference. Okay, review article is the review is like the umbrella term. Meta-analysis is a subset. It's a type of review that is being done. Then, is there any question? Okay, Mr. Drog, I'm listening. What's the question? Yeah, Joel, I'm listening. Apart from Joel, is there anyone with a question? All right. Joel Kabusho said, is there a criteria necessary for submitting a review article? Now, to be honest, okay, some of us have issues with submission. All right. Now, to be honest, review articles are very difficult. They are very, very difficult to write, especially when it's undergraduate students that are involved. Review articles involves you to critically appraise the paper. You have to think very critically. There has to be a lot of criticisms in the paper, okay? And also the sources of your literature is very, very important. So most undergraduate students are finding it very, very difficult to write review articles. But then you can actually start and like work to improve on it. Then review articles also have a word limit of either 4,500 or 5,000 words, okay, depending on the instruction by the journal. So these are the things that you also need to consider. But then review articles are very, very difficult, okay? They are very, very difficult to write. So even after writing a review article, it may not necessarily be accepted at once, okay? The quality may not really be too good. So my advice for you is that you can start working with maybe people that are ahead of you so that you both can be sharpening each other and be working toward perfection. And in no distant time, you actually learn from your mistakes and also develop the skills of critical writing, okay? So you now ask another question, what type of research would be very convenient for beginners? Now, this is letters to the editor, okay? Letters to the editors is actually what most beginners write. It's just like you writing a letter to the editor informing him about something, okay? Commentary, okay? Commentary and letter to the editor. I think that is it. But then you have to be sure that the journal is accepting the article type, okay? Then formalize commentary as a research paper. As name implies, commentary is like you making a comment about the subject matter while giving evidences of other research that have been conducted in that regard. It's like your own comments. You say, okay, this is what I think about this. And other studies have already been conducted and they actually support this. Then you can also make some recommendations as well. All right. Now take for instance, when COVID-19 started, there were a lot of comments. So many people said COVID-19 was a scam. So many people said COVID-19 was real. There were a lot of things, okay? So when you say COVID-19 is a scam, you just have to give like evidences that, okay, COVID-19 is a scam because of this, this, and this. Or you can say COVID-19 is real, reason being that maybe Joel et al. Said this, Casiso et al. Said that, and the rest, okay? Then at the end of the day, you can make some recommendation. And usually for letters to the editors and the commentaries, the word limit is about 1,000 or 1,500. So it's very easy for beginners, for young researchers to do that. It's just like you writing an essay with in-text citation and list of references at the end. Okay, I hope this helps. Then another one is, can one review a journal or journals or draw recent conclusions without carrying out practical, especially science-related journals? Yes. Now, okay, basically review articles, okay? Like I made mention earlier, we have different types of research papers. It can be original research. Original research is the one that you are available in the lab, or you made use of a questionnaire and you analyze the data. That's an original research. Another paper type is letter to the editor. Another one is commentary. Another one is article. Okay, sorry, review article. So review article, it just like entails reviewing other articles and drawing conclusions and rest. So yeah, that's what review articles are all about. So you don't have to conduct any practical. It's just that you just have to be sure of the method you use. You just have to make use of a method that would make sure that you obtain the right results without any bias. Okay. Sorry, my battery is very low. So is there any other question? So I've just sent my email my email address, and on LinkedIn, you can find me on Kenneth Beatrice David.
No, sir. No question again.
Okay, no question. All right, thank you very much. So on LinkedIn, you can find me on Kenneth Beatrice David. Yeah, all right, thank you very much. Then I'll be sending you, all right, I'll be sending you the slide much later. I'll send to the organizers of the event so that it will be shared with everyone.
Okay, thank you so much, sir.
All right, you're welcome. Thank you so much for your time. I'll see you some other time.
All right, sir.
All right, bye. Take care.
All right, we have come to the end of the webinar. So please make sure that you fill the form for certificates. And if you want to join CHANET research team, you also fill the form. And also, I think one of us shared our page link on LinkedIn. You can also reach out to us through the link. And also our name on other social media, Community Health Awareness Network, CHANET, MG. Also, all the slides will be shared via your email. So you'll be expecting it soon. And also the certificates will be a week today. So everything will be gotten a week. You are free to leave now. Thank you.